Welcome to the Foul Front Podcast.
Welcome to the Foul Front Weekly After Action Review.
All right, welcome to the June 21st Foul Front AAR. And remember, this is a review and my reaction / analysis on some of the outdoors content that I consumed this week. I usually end it with my favorite piece, and I actually slipped in a couple things that I wanted to get after that I didn't get after in last week's episode with some news and some cool things that articles that I found. At any rate, started off with the Meat Eater podcast, episode 173, titled, Here's What You Ought to Do. They had Susan on from the National Wild Turkey Federation, and they talked a lot about turkeys and the, what coming out of extinction in the 60s and 70s, and some other fun facts and how they're prospering today, but they're going into a little slip. Pretty interesting stuff, especially if you're, into turkey hunting. I'm about burnt out on turkeys. However, they did hit on one of my favorite topics that I think is super interesting, is the Lacey Act, which I should have a whole episode on the Lacey Act in the future. So maybe I'll do that. Anyways, basically talking about how they couldn't, you can't buy wild animals from, state to state if you want to move animals around or start a population. So how they're actually trading, or they were trading, deer and other things of that nature for turkeys. Kind of an interesting little market, and they have some good banter on there. All right, moving on. The next episode that I listened to was the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast, and they had Barton Ramsey on this week. And they were talking about summer retriever training tips. If you have never listened to the HP Outdoors or anything like that, they have Barton on quite a bit. And Barton, he gets around on the podcast. He is quite a he is a marketing guy. He is very good. Just as good of a retriever trainer. He is an excellent orator and conversationalist. At any rate, if you aren't really into retriever training, there's still some stuff in there for you. I want to have Barton on someday to talk just about running a business, being an entrepreneur, and really getting after it in that department. One cool takeaway that I did have that was absolutely kind of mind-blowing to me was that, I would think, hey, it's really hot out, I'm going to throw the bumper into the water, and my dog's going to be cool because he's in there swimming. Well, really, no, it's just you're going to overheat your dog doing that. But so that's pretty interesting. Moving on, the next episode that I want to talk about is the Big Honker podcast, episode 175. They are doing this public land hunter series where they basically talk to regular guys like you and me. And this week they had a fella on from my neck of the woods, and it was like being in the blind. I learned some mama jokes. I learned that waders kind of suck for fat guys, which is an interesting thing because I kind of having a gripe with the wader industry right now. I'm in the market for some new waders. Can't really pick out a pair that I like. Also not comfortable with spending $300 to $400 on a pair of waders that I can't even try on, and maybe I know how I beat up waders, but maybe it's time to just make an initial investment and jump into a pair of waders that's more than 3 times the amount that I normally would pay. We'll see. If you guys have any good wader suggestions, go ahead and throw them out. At any rate, I want to get into an interesting news article that I found. So a guy's out turkey hunting near Decorah, Iowa, and captures a video of a black bear. What's interesting about this is that it's Iowa, and it's probably the most interesting thing that's happened there in at least 100 years. I'm just kidding. But they have cited this bear 3 different times, I guess, in the last several years, which makes it the first resident bear for Iowa since 1880. That's 1880, not 1980. I misread that initially and was actually kind of floored. I guess they used to be native there. That's enough bear news. You're probably getting tired of that. Yeah, the next episode that I was listening to was the Duck Gun Podcast, episode number 99. Essentially, Elliot and Jordan break it down on how to gain more duck hunting spots each year. They took a listener question and turned it into an entire episode because they're excellent conversationalists. That's the second time I've used that word this podcast. At any rate, it was short, but the biggest takeaway from this podcast was that it was absolutely motivating, and I've been kind of slacking off this summer in securing down new permissions and doing my summer scouting. Just been real busy with a new job and obviously this podcast and baby, wife, whole 9 yards. At any rate, I am pretty pumped to get out and go find some new spots along the river, maybe find a new marsh, something like that. All right, I don't tend to do this too often, but I do have a little bit of a gripe. I was listening to the Lunker Dogs Real Guy podcast for a little bit, trying to branch out. It's fishing season. Check it out, see what's going on. And someone recommended it to me. So I was listening to their philosophy podcasts a little bit, and I've been liking them. But man, they went on a rant about millennials, and that just don't sit too well with me. I'm a millennial, and one of the guys on there is not a millennial. The other one is. There was a little bit of self-deprecating humor there, but I had a friend tell me once, anybody that thinks millennials are soft or weak, and he didn't come up with this, he didn't pen this himself, he found it somewhere else. He said, anybody that thinks millennials are soft and weak have never seen them in close combat with enemies of the United States of America, and I think he's right. We kind of have a rough go of it, us millennials, getting a bunch of crap from the older generations, and this hand-me-down, give me a sticker or a ribbon for 8th place. Well, guess what? We weren't handing them. We didn't beg for those. You were giving them out. So your fault. At any rate, I don't take to it too kindly. Millennials have basically bore the brunt of the longest armed conflict in American history. We have absolutely revolutionized the internet. We are now accepting trade schools at a much higher rate. Older generations didn't have to deal with the student debt we did. I'm not talking about getting your liberal arts degree or whatever and paying $100,000 for it. My dad told me, and evidence backs this up after a tiny bit of research, not a bunch of research, but he paid for his college through a summer job. So, anyways, rant end. Next little tidbit that I wanted to talk about was we've been experiencing some pretty extreme weather. Pretty good little tornado season this year. Unfortunately, there was some life loss and property damage, and that's never a good side of extreme weather, but it's part of living in the Midwest and the Southern Plains. And I, was perusing the internet and trying to figure out, I wonder why some years are so bad and some years are the other. Now, you might not think that the Indian Ocean has anything to do with the weather that is happening in Kansas and Oklahoma, Texas, Nebraska. But apparently there's this thing that happens. And it's called the Madden-Julian Oscillation Effect. Basically, it's like El Nino, but over the Indian Ocean. And who'd have thunk that the weather in India, the weather over the Indian Ocean, that was very ignorant, would be affecting my hometown. Anyways, we'll get into the last piece of... Oh no, I got 2 episodes left. I did my news segment too early. Anyways, I listened to this podcast a little while ago, but it's called Project Upland. And I was actually pretty impressed with the production value of it. Thought it was pretty great. I'm not too into upland, even though that is kind of where I have my roots with my dad. That was like probably the first time I went hunting was... In fact, I know it was. But anyways, he had a photographer and a writer and an avid birder on this episode of his, number 65, and his name's Ben O. Williams. Oh, and by the way, he's 85 or something like that, and just still kicking butt, taking names. And it was a really great podcast. So if you haven't checked out Project Upland, or if you're kind of thinking, hey, maybe I want to get into Upland, or maybe I want to get back into Upland, or I don't know too much about it, this guy seems like he knows what he's talking about. Last, and definitely not least, I am really starting to get into the Cal's Week in a Review from the Meat Eater crew. And this week, he was talking about ravens and basically how crazy they are, how crazy smart they are, using hunters and wolves and everything else to kill prey for them. And then he talks a little bit about red tide and stuff, but I'm really liking the format of that episode, and it's just really interesting. I think they call it a bunch of quick hitters and tips and cool news facts and stuff. So if you're looking for a quick 15-minute episode at the beginning of your week, not at the end of your week, please save that for us. Check out Cal's Week in Review. All right, so that's kind of all the content and stuff that stuck out to me this week, and it's June 21st. Really looking forward to releasing Monday's episode, and I'm glad to be back in the saddle, and hope you guys enjoy this. Hey, seriously, if you don't enjoy it, let me know what you don't like about it. If you do enjoy it, let me know what you like about it. Leave a review, head on over to the Facebook group, or send me an email at foulfront@gmail.com or ben@foulfront.com. I don't care. Hit me up. Let me know what you think. I really do. I'd like to get some input on this, get some listener feedback, maybe take some questions. I don't know. All right. Everybody have a safe and enjoyable weekend, and I really hope that you guys had just as good a week as I did. All right. Later.